Have you ever had a memory so vivid, so real, that you couldn't help but feel like it was a piece of your life you had no business knowing? Imagine being just a child, too young to fully understand the concept of memory or time, yet being haunted by flashes of a woman who isn't your mother, someone you have no conscious reason to remember, but whose presence in your past feels undeniable. That's exactly what happened to one young boy, whose recollections of a mysterious woman, his other mom, became more than just an overactive imagination or the product of a child's wild dreams. In fact, as strange as it sounds, it's a story that begins to blur the line between the realms of the impossible and something much more real. In this video, you're going to hear a story that will challenge everything you think you know about family, memory, and the unexplainable. You might be skeptical at first. After all, who would believe a boy, so young, claiming to remember a woman who isn't his mother, from a time he should have no memory of at all? But what if I told you that the story doesn't end there? What if I told you that his family didn't just dismiss these stories as fantasies, but they started digging deeper, and what they uncovered was nothing short of astonishing? You see, the child's memories weren't just fleeting glimpses of a face or disjointed visions, they were incredibly detailed, from the woman's appearance to places he shouldn't have known existed, and even things about her that no one had ever told him. It was as if his mind had been storing secrets from a past life, secrets that would only surface in a flash, leaving his family confused and increasingly curious. But here's the twist: the more they investigated, the more they found things that couldn't be easily explained away. Evidence started to surface that suggested these memories weren't the product of an overactive imagination, but instead, something far more profound. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's no way something like this can be real, right? But trust me, by the end of this story, you'll have a completely different perspective on the power of memory, the mysteries of family, and the question of what happens when we remember things that maybe we shouldn't. I can't give you all the answers just yet, but stick with me, because this is one of those stories that will make you question everything you think you know about the world around you. You'll see evidence that'll make your jaw drop, and you'll hear details that will make you second-guess what's possible in the realm of the human mind. So, who is this other mom the boy keeps talking about? How could he possibly remember her so clearly if he was just a baby when he last saw her? And what did the family discover when they decided to look deeper into his mysterious claims? I promise you, this is one of those stories that will grip you from the very first moment and keep you on the edge of your seat, wondering what's going to happen next. Don't scroll away, because every piece of this story is crucial, and trust me, you're going to want to hear every detail. You might be asking yourself right now, how could this even be possible? A child remembering a person from a completely different time or even a past life? Is it something paranormal, or is there a more logical explanation hiding in the shadows? Could it be a case of repressed memories resurfacing, or is there something more to the theory of reincarnation? I want you to keep those questions in the back of your mind as you watch, because by the end of this video, you'll have all the pieces, and you'll be just as amazed as I was when I first heard this story. Let's start at the beginning, with the boy's first memory of his other mom. He was only 5 years old when he first spoke about her, but what he said was chilling. He described her in such detail, from the way she looked to the way she smelled, even down to the way she held him when he was a baby. His parents thought it was cute at first, thinking it was just the product of an overactive imagination. But as he grew older, his memories didn't fade like they expected, they only got stronger, clearer, and more specific. At first, they chalked it up to coincidence. After all, kids often make up stories, right? But then came the turning point. One day, the boy mentioned something that his parents couldn't ignore. He talked about a place that was far away from their current home, a place they'd never visited. He described a house, the color of the walls, the garden in the backyard, even the scent of the air. The details were uncanny, and no one had ever told him about this house. No one had ever even mentioned it. Curious and a little freaked out, his family began to ask questions, trying to trace back any possible connection to this mysterious woman and the house. That's when they started to uncover things that left them speechless. They discovered photos of a woman who looked exactly like the boy described, photos from years before he was born. But here's the real kicker: the woman in the photos had been close to their family once, someone they had forgotten about, someone who had mysteriously disappeared from their lives without explanation. Could it be possible that this woman was the other mom the boy was remembering? And that's when things took an even stranger turn. They found a letter, an old letter, hidden away in a box. The letter spoke of a tragic event, something that had torn the family apart years ago. But in the letter, there were mentions of a woman, a mother figure, who had been involved in a life-altering decision. Could this woman have been the boy's other mom? Was there a deeper connection here, something the family hadn't even realized until now? At this point, you might be thinking, what's really going on here? How can all of this possibly connect? Trust me, I'm just getting started. You're about to hear things that will leave you questioning the very fabric of reality. How much do we really know about our pasts? Are there things buried in our subconscious minds that could surface when we least expect them? And most importantly, who is this mysterious woman, and what's her connection to this family's past? Now, I know you're dying to know what happens next. I'm going to take you through the twists and turns of this mind-bending story, where every new discovery leads to even more questions, and every answer seems to open up a world of possibilities. You won't believe where this journey ends, and trust me, you'll be on the edge of your seat the entire time. So, are you ready to dive deeper into this mystery? I promise, you won't want to miss what happens next. Stay tuned, because the truth is even stranger than you can imagine. I'm about to reveal the shocking details that will leave you stunned. This is a story you'll be thinking about long after you've finished watching. Don't blink, don't scroll away, because the answer to this mystery is about to unfold, and it's going to change everything you thought you knew. What do you think happened? Could this boy's memories be real, or is there something else at play here? Stick with me to find out, because the answer is coming, and you won't believe it when you hear it. As we continue to dive deeper into this mystery, it's important to understand a bit more about the boy's recent activities and the family dynamics that might be at play. The boy, who we'll refer to as Ethan, had always been a quiet child, introspective and observant beyond his years. He wasn't the type to throw tantrums or cause trouble. In fact, he often preferred to keep to himself. But this was a family that had its own history of hidden secrets, buried deep beneath the surface, and Ethan's peculiar memories were the first sign that something was wrong, something neither his parents nor anyone else in the family could quite put their finger on. The boy's behavior, his strange recollections, seemed so out of place in the context of his otherwise normal life that it began to raise more questions than answers. His parents, Tom and Sarah, hadn't been prepared for this kind of situation. They were a typical middle-class couple living in suburban America, with jobs that kept them busy and a family life that appeared, on the outside, to be peaceful and uncomplicated. They had their ups and downs like any family, but nothing could have prepared them for the surreal twist their life was about to take. In the weeks leading up to Ethan's increasingly vivid recollections, his parents had noticed some odd behaviors. He'd become strangely fixated on certain objects, like a vintage photo album tucked away in the attic, which he insisted on flipping through even though no one in the house ever paid much attention to it. One afternoon, he came across a photograph of a woman who appeared to be in her late 20s, wearing a long, flowing dress, standing by a beach with a baby cradled in her arms. Ethan had paused at the photo, his finger tracing the woman's face, and murmured, "That's my other mom." His parents, who were trying to make sense of the statement, chalked it up to some kind of innocent confusion. After all, they reasoned, children often mix up memories or create imaginary friends. But as time went on, Ethan's connection to this image seemed to deepen, and his insistence that this woman was a central figure in his past became more convincing. He even began to describe the woman in details no child his age could have possibly known. He spoke about the warmth of her touch, the way she smelled of lavender and vanilla, and the soft melodies she would hum as she rocked him to sleep. These weren't the kinds of things children just make up, especially when they hadn't been taught to do so. It wasn't just the photograph that raised red flags. There were more instances where Ethan seemed to be recalling memories from a time far before his birth. One evening, Sarah found him in the backyard, standing still, staring at the horizon, almost as if in a trance. When she approached him, he looked up at her with wide eyes and simply said, "I remember the garden, but not this garden. I remember the other one." He spoke with such clarity, such certainty, that Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if he was seeing something she couldn't. At first, Sarah tried to dismiss it, but the more Ethan's behavior escalated, the harder it became to ignore the possibility that something was going on beyond their understanding. It was around this time that they started to wonder if there was more to the story, if the past they thought they knew so well was hiding something much darker. They decided to start digging into their family history, something they had never really thought to do before. And that's when things started to take a strange turn. The first few days of their search didn't yield anything particularly unusual. They found the usual family mementos, old birthday cards, and photos of relatives. But then, as they started sifting through some of Tom's old boxes, a few oddities began to emerge: papers, receipts, and letters from a time before Ethan was born, from people they had never heard of. Some of the names stood out as especially suspicious, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were uncovering pieces to a puzzle that had been deliberately hidden. Among the letters they discovered was one that made Sarah's heart race. It was an old correspondence between Tom and a woman named Catherine, written just a few months before Ethan was born. The letter was polite, but there was an undertone of tension, as though something had happened that caused a rift between the two. The content was vague, but one part of it stuck with Sarah. Catherine wrote that she would always be a part of Tom's life and that the past would find its way back to him when the time was right. Sarah had never heard Tom mention this woman before, and when she asked him about it, his response was quick and defensive. "It was a past relationship I've moved on from," he said, but his eyes didn't meet hers. There was something off about the way he said it, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Could this mysterious Catherine be connected to the woman Ethan was describing? Could there be something in Tom's past that he hadn't shared with her, something that had been locked away for years? To add even more confusion to the mix, there was another person who seemed to have some knowledge of the situation: Ethan's older cousin, Melissa. Melissa had always been a bit of a free spirit, known for her wild stories and love of mystery. She was one of those people who was always searching for the unknown, and her interest in things like past lives, reincarnation, and the paranormal was no secret. The moment Ethan started talking about his other mom, Melissa had seemed unusually interested, even encouraging him to share more details. But then, one evening, when Sarah asked Melissa what she knew about the mysterious woman, Melissa became evasive. She hesitated before answering, and her tone shifted to one of discomfort. "It's not my place to say," she muttered, before quickly changing the subject. Sarah felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. What was Melissa hiding? Was she involved in this somehow? Or was she simply trying to play along with Ethan's imaginative tales to keep him entertained? As the mystery deepened, Ethan's behavior only grew more unsettling. He began to speak less of his other mom and more of an event that seemed to have marked a turning point in his life. He described the day he was taken from the other mother's care and placed with Tom and Sarah. But the way he told the story, his tone, the way he vividly recalled the details of the car ride, the sound of his cries, and the overwhelming sense of abandonment made it sound as though he were recounting a real experience. He had no reason to know these things. There was no logical explanation for how a 5-year-old could remember something like that. And yet, the pieces were starting to fit together in a way that couldn't be ignored. Could Ethan's memories be connected to something more than just a simple misunderstanding or a child's fantasy? Was there a deeper, darker truth hidden in his past? What was it about Catherine, Tom's old relationship, that seemed to trigger these memories? And what role did Melissa play in all of this? The deeper they dug, the more tangled the web became. With each revelation, new questions emerged, and the answers seemed to slip further and further out of reach. The only thing certain at this point was that Ethan's memories were not just the product of a child's imagination. There was something much more to this story. Something, or someone, was trying to keep the truth hidden, and as the family unraveled the layers of this mystery, they found themselves facing a reality that was stranger, and far more unsettling, than they could have ever anticipated. But what exactly was the truth? And who was really pulling the strings behind the scenes? Stay tuned, because the answers are just beginning to unfold, and what comes next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about this family's past. As the days passed, the family's investigation into Ethan's mysterious memories seemed to grow more intense, but with every step forward, there were forces working against them, pulling them further into a web of uncertainty. Just when they thought they were on the verge of discovering the truth, new obstacles emerged that made everything more complicated and more dangerous than they ever could have imagined. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came one quiet evening when Sarah decided to visit the old family attic once again. She had been there countless times, but this time, she was determined to find anything at all that could shed more light on the truth behind Ethan's recollections. She'd been going through the old boxes with Tom's help, finding letters, photographs, and documents that seemed important, but there was one particular box she hadn't gotten around to exploring. It was tucked away in the far corner of the attic, a dusty wooden crate that had always been ignored. She pulled it out, brushing off the cobwebs, and cracked it open, eager to see what might be inside. But what she found left her speechless. Inside the box was a set of old journals, their pages yellowed with age, their covers worn and faded. They didn't look like the kind of thing anyone in the family would have kept, at least, not without a reason. As she flipped through the pages, her heart sank. The journals appeared to be written by someone who had been very close to Tom, someone who had a significant role in the past they were now trying to uncover. The entries spoke of a woman, Catherine. But the more Sarah read, the more disturbing the revelations became. There were references to betrayal, lies, and a secret that had been hidden for years, an event that had changed everything, something that could explain why the family had been kept in the dark for so long. The entries were cryptic, but there was a clear pattern of guilt and regret, and the name of someone Tom had trusted was mentioned repeatedly. But as Sarah reached the last entry, something strange happened. She went to turn the page, but the journal was suddenly blank. It was as if the last few pages had been torn out, removed entirely. Sarah's heart pounded as she flipped through the rest of the journals, but they, too, seemed to have gaps, pages missing, sections of text erased. It was as though someone had deliberately tried to erase the past. Sarah was furious. How could someone have gotten to these journals, taken out crucial information, and left them in a way that made it nearly impossible to understand the full story? Her mind raced, and she quickly realized that this wasn't just an innocent oversight, it was deliberate. Someone didn't want her to uncover the truth. Someone was hiding something, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to make sure it stayed buried. She stormed down the stairs and confronted Tom, demanding to know what was going on. His face went pale when she told him about the missing pages, and for the first time, he didn't look her in the eye. He stammered, trying to explain, but his words faltered. I don't know why those pages are gone, Sarah. I never even knew those journals existed." His voice was shaky, but something in his expression told Sarah that he wasn't being completely honest. He was hiding something, and she could see it in his eyes. Before she could press him further, there was a knock at the door. It was Melissa, Ethan's older cousin, looking unusually nervous. She had always been the one who seemed most interested in the mystery of Ethan's memories, but now she looked more like someone who was trying to keep a lid on things. "I think you need to stop looking into this," Melissa said, her voice low and urgent. "You're getting too close, and it's not safe." Sarah was taken aback. She had always considered Melissa a bit eccentric, but she never thought she would be the one to warn her off. "What do you mean? Why isn't it safe?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. "Because some things are better left in the past," Melissa replied, glancing around nervously as if she feared someone was watching. "There's more to this than you realize. It's not just about Ethan. There are people who don't want you digging deeper. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Her cryptic warning only made Sarah more suspicious. Who was Melissa really protecting, and why was she suddenly so eager to stop the investigation? Sarah had always trusted her, but now, a nagging feeling told her that Melissa might be hiding something important, something that could change everything. The tension between them grew, but before Sarah could ask any more questions, Melissa turned abruptly and left. The unsettling encounter left Sarah shaken, and she began to feel the weight of the investigation pressing down on her more than ever. The deeper they dug, the more dangerous it seemed to get. But the one thing that haunted her the most was the realization that someone was actively trying to prevent them from uncovering the truth. The thought that they were being watched, that their every move was being monitored, only added to the growing sense of paranoia. As Sarah and Tom tried to make sense of Melissa's warning, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. The following day, a strange package arrived at their doorstep. It was addressed to Ethan, but there was no return address. Inside the package, they found something unexpected, an old, worn-out book. The cover was faded, But the title was clear: The Lost Memories. It was a book about reincarnation, past lives, and the possibility that some people are born with memories of lives they have lived before. Sarah flipped through the pages, reading passages about how memories could sometimes resurface in children, memories of people, places, and events they couldn't possibly know about. But as she read, a cold chill ran through her. The book wasn't just about the theory of reincarnation, it was full of real, personal stories, and it contained details about a family, Tom's family. The book detailed events that matched Tom's past exactly, including mentions of a woman named Catherine. The similarities were too striking to ignore. The more Sarah read, the more certain she became that the answers they were searching for were hidden in plain sight, disguised as a work of fiction. But who sent the book? And why now? Was it a warning, or was it a clue that would lead them to the truth? The closer they got to the truth, the more people seemed to be pushing back. And just when it felt like they were about to unravel everything, another unexpected turn of events left them with more questions than answers. Tom received a phone call late that night from an anonymous number. The voice on the other end was low, distorted, and unfamiliar, but the message was clear: stop looking for the truth. You'll never find it. Some things are meant to stay buried. Tom tried to trace the call, but the number was untraceable. There was no way to know who had called or why they were so determined to shut them down. Was it someone from Tom's past, someone who knew too much? Or was it an outside force, trying to silence them before they uncovered a secret that could destroy everything? One thing was certain: the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous it became. And with each new twist, the story was becoming more convoluted, more surreal. Ethan's memories, the missing journals, the cryptic warnings from Melissa, and now the anonymous phone call, everything pointed to a hidden truth that was more elusive than ever. So what were they really up against? Who was behind all of this? And most importantly, what happened to Catherine, and why was her presence still haunting this family after all these years? As Sarah and Tom prepared to confront the next phase of their investigation, they had no idea how deep the rabbit hole truly went, or how much they still had to lose. The answers were out there, but they seemed just beyond their reach, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The deeper they dug, the more they realized that some truths are more dangerous than others. And with every answer they uncovered, the stakes grew higher, the danger more palpable. What would happen when they finally uncovered the truth? Would it destroy everything they had built? Or would it set them free? Stay with me, because the next part of this story is going to change everything. And trust me, you won't see the twist coming. The next few days passed in a haze of confusion and anxiety, as Sarah and Tom tried to process everything they had learned while still grappling with the mounting pressure to stop digging. But just when they thought the mystery couldn't get any more complicated, an unexpected turn of events brought even more confusion and even more danger into their lives. Tom had always kept a somewhat distant relationship with his brother, Jack. The two had grown apart over the years, mainly due to differences in lifestyle and a growing distance fueled by unresolved issues from their past. But they had always remained civil. Jack, who lived in another state, had kept to himself after the fallout with Tom, but when the phone call came one night, everything changed. It was Jack on the other end of the line, his voice unusually shaky, his words laced with fear. "Tom, you need to stop what you're doing. Stop looking into the past. It's not worth it," Jack said, his voice sounding more urgent than Tom had ever heard. At first, Tom thought it was just his brother being his usual distant self, offering advice that wasn't really needed. But Jack's next words froze him in place. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this from you," Jack continued, barely above a whisper. "They're watching. I don't know how they found out, but they know you're looking. And it's not just your family. It's me, too. They know what I've been hiding, and they won't stop until they get what they want." The line went dead before Tom could say anything in response. He stared at the phone for what felt like an eternity, the weight of Jack's words settling in like an anchor, pulling him deeper into something he didn't understand. Who was Jack talking about? Who were they, and why was Jack so scared? More than that, why was Jack involved in this at all? The sudden revelation that Jack, someone Tom hadn't seen in years, was apparently tied to whatever was going on through the entire investigation into disarray. For the first time, Tom wondered whether there was a side to his family's history he hadn't even begun to understand. Could Jack have been hiding something all along? Was he involved in the same hidden world Tom had been trying to uncover, or was he simply a victim of it, too? With Jack now seemingly in the mix, the mystery surrounding Ethan's memories and the woman named Catherine became even murkier. But the most unnerving part was the realization that someone, or something, had been watching their every move. That phone call wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. Whoever these people were, they were determined to stop Tom and Sarah from uncovering the truth at any cost. As if this wasn't enough, Sarah had her own encounter that raised even more troubling questions. One afternoon, after Tom's phone call with Jack, Sarah decided to visit the local library, hoping to find something that could shed light on the mysterious book they'd received, The Lost Memories. She thought maybe there was something in the library's archives that could help her connect the dots between the strange book and her own family's history. When she arrived, the librarian, a quiet older man named Mr. Hughes, greeted her with a knowing look. He had always been helpful in the past, but this time, there was something in his eyes that made her uneasy. Looking for something in particular, he asked, his tone almost too casual. "I'm just doing some research," Sarah replied, trying to remain calm. "About reincarnation and past lives." Mr. Hughes's face twitched ever so slightly, but he quickly masked it with a polite smile. "Ah, yes. We have a few books on that subject. Let me show you." But when he led her to the shelves, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She was sure that Mr. Hughes knew more than he was letting on. As he pointed her toward the section she needed, his hand brushed against a book on the shelf, and for a brief moment, his eyes flickered with something Sarah couldn't quite place. It was almost as if he had a hidden agenda, as if he knew exactly what she was looking for. She grabbed the book and thanked him, but as she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of Mr. Hughes's face in the reflection of a glass display case. His expression was colder now, almost predatory. Something was definitely wrong, and the sudden tension made Sarah's skin crawl. She left the library as quickly as she could, clutching the book tightly, but the uneasy feeling lingered. Was Mr. Hughes involved somehow? Or was she simply letting her paranoia get the best of her? It was impossible to say, but one thing was clear: the more they uncovered, the more people seemed to be connected to the mystery and the more resistance they faced. The deeper they dug, the more they realized that the secrets they were chasing weren't just buried in the past, they were actively being protected by people in the present. People they thought they knew. Meanwhile, Ethan's memories seemed to be taking on an even more surreal tone. One night, after a particularly long day of searching for clues, Ethan came to Sarah with a drawing. He had spent hours working on it, and when he handed it to her, she gasped. It was a picture of a house, an old, decrepit house with overgrown weeds in the yard and broken windows. But what took Sarah's breath away wasn't just the detail of the drawing, it was the fact that the house looked eerily familiar. It was a house she had never seen before, yet somehow, it felt like it belonged to her. It was almost as if Ethan had drawn a place from her own past, a place she had no memory of. When she asked him what the house was, Ethan's response was simple, but chilling. "It's where I used to live, before I came here." It's where she lived. His voice wavered as if the memory itself was painful for him to recall. "She's waiting for me to come back." This revelation hit Sarah like a freight train. How could Ethan possibly know about a house like that? There was no way he could have drawn something that detailed without seeing it firsthand. Yet, somehow, his memories were leading them to a place that didn't exist in their current reality. The house, the woman, everything was connected, and yet, it felt as though it was all slipping through their fingers, just out of reach. As the days passed, it became clear that this wasn't just about Ethan's memories anymore. It was about a hidden history, a history so deep and so dangerous that people were willing to go to great lengths to keep it buried. And the more Sarah and Tom tried to uncover the truth, the more they realized that they were in way over their heads. With Jack's cryptic warning, Mr. Hughes's suspicious behavior, Ethan's drawing leading them to a house that didn't exist, and the constant threats hanging over their heads, it was impossible to know who to trust or what to believe anymore. Every new clue seemed to contradict the last, and the closer they got to the truth, the more isolated they became. Was this a conspiracy that spanned generations? Were they dealing with something supernatural, Or was it all just an elaborate hoax designed to keep them in the dark? The answers, it seemed, were hidden deeper than they ever could have imagined. And no matter how hard they tried to unravel the mystery, it only became more complicated, more dangerous, and more impossible to solve. As Sarah and Tom stood on the precipice of the truth, one thing was certain: everything they thought they knew was about to be turned upside down. But would they be able to survive the revelations that awaited them, or would the darkness of the past swallow them whole? Only time would tell, and the answers were coming sooner than they expected. Stay with me, because you won't believe what happens next. The calm that had settled over the investigation after their last round of discoveries shattered abruptly on a cold, overcast afternoon. It wasn't anything that could be pinpointed by a single moment or event, but the gradual, creeping sense of dread that enveloped Sarah and Tom was impossible to ignore. It started innocently enough: small things, the kind that made you second-guess yourself. A door slightly ajar when they were certain it had been closed. The flicker of lights at odd times. A strange feeling that they were being watched, as if someone, somewhere, was aware of every move they made. But it wasn't until that evening, when everything they had uncovered seemed to collide in a way they couldn't have foreseen, that they realized they were no longer just searching for the truth, they were running from something much darker than they had ever imagined. It started when Sarah received an anonymous message, sent late at night to her phone. It wasn't an email, not a typical text, it was a video message. Her hands were trembling as she pressed play, and what she saw almost made her drop the phone in horror. The video was short, only a few seconds long, but it was enough. In the video, Tom was standing in their front yard, the same tired look on his face that had been there for days. But what chilled her to the bone was the figure in the background, barely visible, standing just out of view. A shadow, too dark to make out clearly, but unmistakably human. It wasn't anyone Sarah recognized, and the figure didn't move, just stood there, motionless, watching. The video ended abruptly, and Sarah's heart began to race. She replayed it several times, her mind frantically trying to come up with an explanation. Could it be a coincidence? Maybe it was someone else entirely. But deep down, she knew the truth. They were being followed. Someone was watching them, and they were close. Sarah's breath caught in her chest as a wave of panic hit. How had they gotten the video? Who had recorded it? Why was the figure in the shadows so intent on keeping track of Tom? The message was simple, written in stark, capital letters beneath the video: "You're closer than you think. Stop now, or it won't end well for you." The words sent a cold shiver down her spine, but it was the tone, quiet, firm, cold, that made her blood run cold. There was no mistaking it: whoever was behind this wasn't playing games anymore. They wanted them to stop, and they weren't afraid to use intimidation to get their way. As the realization of their danger set in, Sarah felt her stomach twist into knots. She needed to tell Tom, but what could they possibly do? Who could they trust? And how far would they go to protect their secrets? By the time Sarah found Tom, the weight of what she had just seen and felt was almost too much to carry. She tried to keep her voice steady as she showed him the message, but he could see the terror in her eyes, and it only made his own growing sense of dread intensify. Tom had always thought the investigation into Ethan's memories, into Catherine and their family's buried past, was strange, but he never imagined that it would escalate into something so dangerous. He had chalked up the threats, the warnings, and the bizarre events as coincidences, but now it was becoming painfully clear: they were being hunted. "We can't ignore this anymore," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "Someone is watching us. Someone's been following us, close enough to get footage of you in the yard." Tom's face drained of color as he looked at the video, his mind racing. What have we gotten ourselves into? He thought. What do we do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his mind struggling to come to terms with the reality of the situation. "We go to the police," Sarah suggested, but even as she said it, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. Would the police believe them? Could they protect them from something so deeply hidden, so dangerous? The mystery wasn't just about Ethan's memories anymore, it was about forces much bigger, much darker, than they had realized. People who were willing to go to extreme lengths to make sure the truth stayed buried. People who were willing to kill to keep their secrets safe. Before they could make any decisions, the phone rang. It was Jack. His voice sounded strange, almost hollow, like he was speaking from somewhere far away. "Tom," Jack said, his words rushed, panicked. "Get out of the house. Now. They know about you. They're coming for you." The line went dead before Tom could respond. His heart pounded in his chest as Sarah's eyes widened with fear. They had no idea who they were or why Jack sounded so desperate, but one thing was clear: they weren't just being watched. They were being hunted. In a daze, Tom grabbed Sarah's hand and hurried out of the house, both of them looking over their shoulders with every step they took. Their quiet neighborhood, once so safe, now felt like a prison, a place where shadows lurked and watched from behind every corner. As they reached the street, Tom turned to look back at the house, half expecting to see someone or something lurking in the doorway. But nothing. The house was silent, still. Too still. The feeling of being watched hung in the air like a suffocating fog. They didn't know where to go. They had no idea who to trust. As the minutes ticked by, paranoia began to settle in, clouding their every thought. Who could be behind this? And why were they targeting them? Tom's mind raced through all the possible explanations. Was this about the journals? About the books? About Catherine? The connection between their family's past and Ethan's memories? Or was it something more? A deep, unsettling thought gnawed at him. Was someone in his family involved in this? Had they been hiding something from him all along? As they reached the end of the street, Tom's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, hoping for some kind of answer, some shred of clarity. But when he saw the message on the screen, his blood ran cold. It wasn't just a threat this time. It was a direct warning. "You're too late. They've already found her." The words were so simple, but the weight they carried was overwhelming. Who had they found? And why had they written it to him, specifically to him? Tom felt his chest tighten, and he looked at Sarah, whose face was pale with fear. "We need to find out what happened to Jack," he said, his voice hoarse. But even as he said it, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. They turned to head back toward the car, but the sudden, sharp sound of tires screeching to a halt behind them made them both freeze. A black car, sleek and ominous, had pulled up behind them. Two men stepped out, their faces obscured by dark sunglasses, their movements calculated and deliberate. They didn't speak, but the message was clear: they were here for Tom and Sarah, and they wouldn't leave until they got what they came for. Fear shot through Tom's veins as he grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the alley next to their house. But it was too late. They were trapped. The chase was on, and there was no way out. The walls were closing in faster than they could react, and no matter where they turned, the mystery surrounding Ethan's memories and the dark secrets of the past seemed to be tightening its grip on them. No one was safe, not even those closest to them. And as the men in dark suits closed in, Tom knew one thing for certain: the answers they were searching for would cost them everything. "Stay with me, because the next chapter is going to reveal the terrifying truth behind it all. And trust me, you're not ready for what happens next." As the men in dark suits closed in on them, Sarah's heart raced, her mind screaming for a way out. Tom's grip on her hand tightened, but the alley was narrow, and the street was quiet enough that there was nowhere to hide. She could hear their footsteps behind them, deliberate, methodical, as if they knew exactly where they were going. Every instinct told her to run, to sprint in the opposite direction and not look back, but there was nowhere to go. Just as they reached the end of the alley, with the ominous black car blocking their path, a voice rang out, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Stop." The voice was calm, almost eerily so, and it came from someone they both knew, someone they had never imagined would be part of this. Turning slowly, Tom and Sarah were stunned to see Jack standing there, his face pale, eyes wide with fear. He was the last person they'd expected to show up in this moment, and yet here he was, standing between them and the men who had been hunting them. Jack's presence didn't bring comfort, though. It only added to the growing sense that they were spiraling deeper into a nightmare. The men in suits stopped, their cold expressions never wavering, but Jack stood his ground, blocking their path. "You need to listen to me," Jack said, his voice strained. "All of you. There's something I haven't told you. Something I should have told you the moment this all started." His eyes flickered nervously to the two men, who, despite standing still, seemed to tense in unison at the words. Sarah was too stunned to speak, but Tom's shock quickly turned to suspicion. "Jack," he said, his voice sharp, "what the hell is going on? Who are these guys? What do they want with us?" The question hung in the air, but Jack didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath and then finally looked directly at Tom, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and fear. "Those men are part of something bigger. Something I've been involved in for longer than I care to admit," Jack said, his voice breaking. "But it's not just about the past, or the memories you've been chasing. It's about something far worse. Something that has been following our family for generations. And you, Tom, and you, Sarah," he looked directly at her now, his gaze turning darker, "you've been caught up in it because of something I did. Something I never should have done." Tom's heart skipped a beat as his mind tried to piece together the words. He couldn't make sense of them, but one thing was clear: Jack, the brother who had been so distant, who had always kept his secrets, was now telling them they were in danger because of something he had done. But what could he possibly be referring to? The mystery surrounding Ethan's memories? The books? The strange connection to Catherine? Jack had always been a bit of an enigma, but this felt different. This felt like a deep betrayal. "You're the one who started all this?" Tom asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you mean, Jack?" Before Jack could answer, one of the men in suits stepped forward, his hand outstretched, as if to silence Jack. His cold, calculating gaze never left Tom's face as he spoke in a low, measured tone. "Jack is not the only one who's been hiding things. You've all been looking for answers, digging into places you shouldn't. But what you don't realize is that your search has put you in the center of something much bigger. Your family has always been part of it. And now, you're all involved, whether you like it or not." Tom's mind raced, but he was no closer to understanding. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" he demanded, his voice rising with frustration. The man didn't flinch. "We're the keepers of the truth. The ones who protect it. And you," he said, pointing directly at Tom, "have been digging up things that should have stayed buried." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as the pieces began to fall into place. All along, she thought they were uncovering the truth about Ethan's memories, about Catherine, about their family's hidden history. But now it was becoming clear that what they were searching for was much more dangerous than they had ever imagined. They weren't just dealing with forgotten memories or past lives, they were caught in something far more sinister. And they hadn't even realized it until now. Jack's eyes flickered to the men, then back to Tom. "They know everything. They've been watching us for years. Watching me. Watching you. Watching your son. And it's not just about Ethan's memories, or even about Catherine. It's about control. Power. And it's been a part of our family's bloodline for generations. I thought I could break free of it. I thought I could keep you all safe, but I was wrong. It's too late now." Tom's chest tightened, his mind reeling. Jack's words didn't make sense, not at first. But there was one thing that stuck with him: Jack had been involved with these people. He'd known about them. And now, whatever he had done had brought them to their doorstep. The mystery was never about the books, or even Ethan's memories. It was about something else entirely, something buried deep within their family, something tied to their blood, to their very existence. And whatever it was far from over. In fact, they were just getting started. The man in the suit took a step closer, and Tom felt a surge of panic. They were being herded, pushed into a corner, forced to confront something they weren't prepared for. Sarah grabbed Tom's hand, her fingers trembling, but her grip was tight. They had to get out. They had to find a way to escape before it was too late. But Jack wasn't done. "I never wanted you to get involved in this," Jack said, his voice barely audible. "But you're already in too deep. You've already stirred the pot, and now it's coming for all of us." The words sent a shock through Tom. It's coming for all of us. What did that mean? What had Jack done? What was coming? And how could they possibly escape it now? Just as Tom opened his mouth to ask another question, everything changed. A loud crash echoed from the direction of the street, followed by shouts, and suddenly, the men in suits turned, their attention diverted for a split second. The distraction was enough for Jack to grab Tom by the arm and pull him toward the alley behind them, his movements frantic. "Run! Now, he shouted. The chaos around them grew as Jack led them through a maze of back alleys, Tom and Sarah stumbling to keep up, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had no idea what was going on, or who was causing the distraction, but Jack's desperate urgency told them one thing: they weren't safe, not anymore. Whoever had been pulling the strings all along wasn't done yet. And with each twist and turn, they were inching closer to a revelation that would shatter everything they thought they knew. What was Jack hiding? What was the true purpose of their search? And who, exactly, were the men in suits? The questions piled up, but the answers seemed more elusive than ever. One thing was certain: the danger was far from over, and the truth was far darker than they could have ever imagined. Stay with me, because what happens next will make you question everything. The narrow alley stretched before them, each turn seeming to close in tighter, more suffocating. Jack led the way with urgency, pulling Tom and Sarah through the twisted maze of shadows. The sudden commotion back on the street had bought them a few precious seconds, but the pounding in their chests told them they weren't safe, not by a long shot. Jack had warned them to run, but the desperation in his eyes, the weight of his secret, was making everything feel even more impossible. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, Tom wasn't sure where to go, who to trust, or even what they were really running from. They reached a small, dimly lit door at the end of the alley, an old building, its windows boarded up and its entrance unmarked. Jack pushed it open without a word, and they all stepped inside. The room was dark, cold, and smelled faintly of mildew and dust. As Jack closed the door behind them, he turned, facing Tom and Sarah with an expression that was far too serious for the gravity of the situation. "We need to talk," Jack said, his voice heavy, weighed down by everything unsaid between them. His words felt like a bomb about to go off, and the tension in the air thickened with every second that passed. Tom's heart raced. He wanted answers, he had to know what Jack had done to drag them into this, but the fear that gnawed at him now was something deeper. It wasn't just about the truth anymore. It was about survival. Sarah, too, stood in silence, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. She'd been through so much already, and now, with this growing sense of impending danger, it felt as if the world they had known had turned upside down. They couldn't even trust Jack now, not fully. He had kept them in the dark, kept his involvement with these shadowy figures hidden until the last possible moment. And now, he was telling them they had to face something that had been buried for years, something that might cost them everything. "Jack," Tom started, his voice shaking, "what the hell is going on? You've known about these people, these keepers, and you never told us. What are we really dealing with here?" His mind was a jumbled mess of unanswered questions. Why had Jack allowed them to dig deeper into this family secret? Why hadn't he stepped in sooner? Jack's face twisted with guilt, but it was more than that, it was regret, and something darker, something that made Tom's stomach churn. "I never wanted to drag you into this," Jack said, his words slow, deliberate. "I thought I could protect you, protect us. I was wrong." Sarah stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper, as she tried to make sense of everything. "What do you mean protect us? From what? From who?" Jack ran a hand through his hair, pacing back and forth, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. "From them," he finally said, his eyes flicking nervously toward the door as if the shadows themselves might be listening. "From the people who've been watching us. They're not just after Ethan's memories, or the books, or whatever you think you've uncovered. They've been manipulating this family for years. They control everything, from the inside out. And I got involved because I thought I could stop them. But I was wrong." Tom felt his head spin. His instincts screamed at him to walk away, to shut his ears and not listen to any more of this. But the weight of Jack's words, how they seemed to unravel everything he had thought he understood about their family, held him in place. He wanted to scream, to demand Jack tell him everything. But it was too much. Too much to process, too much to bear. The stakes were rising higher with every word. Jack was admitting his own involvement, yes, but he was also admitting that everything they had been through was part of a much larger game, one they couldn't even begin to understand. "I thought I could protect you," Jack continued, his voice barely more than a whisper now. "But now they're coming for all of us. They know we're close to finding the truth, and they won't stop until they erase everything, until they erase you. You have to make a choice now. You can leave. You can run, and they'll stop following you. They'll let you go. But if you stay, if you keep digging into this, they will come after you. They will kill you. The words hit Tom like a physical blow. They weren't just threats, they were promises. Jack's eyes, wild with fear, locked onto his. And there's something else, Jack added, his voice barely above a whisper, the truth, it's worse than you think. If you uncover it, if you go too deep, it might change everything you believe about this family. About yourself. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Tom stared at Jack, feeling the weight of the decision crushing him. He wanted to say something, he wanted to scream, to demand that Jack tell them everything, but the question kept coming back. Could they really walk away from the truth? Could they really leave everything behind, let these people win, knowing that the cost of doing so might be their very lives? The truth wasn't just something that hung in the air anymore. It was something tangible, something so dark and dangerous that it threatened to tear everything apart. Jack's voice broke through his thoughts. You have a choice, he said. The truth will cost you everything. But if you want to live, if you want to survive, you need to walk away. The room fell silent. Tom looked at Sarah, his heart torn in two. She looked just as lost as he felt, and in her eyes, he saw the same pain, the same fear. They had come this far. They had uncovered so much. But was it worth it? Was it worth their lives? Before either of them could respond, there was a loud knock on the door, followed by a voice, cold, commanding. We know you're in there. Open the door, or we'll come in. The chill in the man's voice made it clear that he wasn't asking. Whoever they were done playing games. Time was running out, and the walls were closing in faster than Tom could process. A surge of adrenaline coursed through him. There was no more time for hesitation. The choice had been made for them. But as Jack's gaze shifted to the door and back to them, something dark flickered in his eyes. He wasn't just afraid of the people outside. He was afraid of what Tom and Sarah might do if they chose to stay. And in that moment, Tom realized something that made his heart sink even further. Jack had been more than just a part of this family's twisted legacy. He had been a player. A key player. And the choices they were facing now weren't just about survival, they were about a much bigger game. One they hadn't even begun to understand. The knock came again, louder this time. And then, in the dead silence that followed, Jack made the most shocking decision of all. Get out of here, he said, his voice shaking with fear. You have to leave. Now. You can't keep going. And just like that, the world seemed to crash down around them. Tom's heart was hammering in his chest as he stood frozen, torn between the fear and the anger bubbling up inside him. The knock on the door had shattered the fragile moment of clarity they'd been clinging to. Jack's warning, leave or stay, the choice was theirs, felt like a weight crushing Tom's soul. But there was no more time for hesitation. No more time for second guesses. The figures outside were not going to wait for them to make up their minds. Jack's eyes darted between them and the door, his breathing ragged, but it wasn't just fear that tightened his grip on the moment. There was something deeper, something darker, a truth that had yet to be fully revealed. If you stay, Jack said, voice trembling, they'll come for you. They won't stop. You won't make it out. But Tom could feel the betrayal seeping through Jack's words. Everything Jack had said felt like part of the truth, but now, with the weight of the gunmetal grey door between them and their enemies, Tom realized that Jack wasn't just hiding from the past. He was part of it. Jack had been entangled in this conspiracy from the very beginning, maybe even orchestrating it in ways they couldn't yet understand. The knocking came again, harder this time. Each blow seemed to rattle the walls of the room, the air thick with tension. Jack's eyes were locked on Tom now, as though pleading for him to understand the danger. But Tom wasn't listening anymore. His mind was spinning, unraveling the threads of what they had uncovered, piecing together the darker reality that had always been lurking just beneath the surface. What had Jack meant when he said, "They know everything"? Was Jack protecting them, or was he protecting something else? Tom was no longer sure. Suddenly, the truth hit him with an icy clarity. Jack wasn't the only one with secrets. As he turned toward Sarah, her face reflected the same confusion and fear that gripped his own heart. She had been with him every step of the way, through the books, the memories, the connections, and now, she was the only one he trusted. But even she had been kept in the dark. The truth was bigger than just the two of them. It was a web that had ensnared everyone, Jack, Ethan, even their family, reaching deeper into the shadows than either of them could have anticipated. And now, it was their turn to become part of the game. As the door shuddered from the force of the latest knock, Tom's stomach dropped. He felt the tension shift in the room, a change in the air that sent a chill through him. Something was wrong. This wasn't just about Ethan's memories. It wasn't even about the books. It was about control. Power. Something far more dangerous than any of them had realized. Just then, the door swung open, and the men in suits flooded into the room like a wall of ice. Tom barely had time to register the familiar face among them before it hit him, Marcus. His best friend. The one who had been by his side for years, the one who had helped them track down leads, who had been part of their search for the truth. Tom's heart froze as their eyes locked. There was no recognition in Marcus's gaze, no warmth, no camaraderie, just cold calculation. Marcus. Tom choked out, his voice shaking as the realization hit. What the hell? Marcus stepped forward without a word, his face unreadable. But Tom could see the change in him now, the way he carried himself, the way his eyes flicked over to Jack with an unsettling look of understanding. I'm sorry it had to come to this, Tom, Marcus said, his voice devoid of any emotion. But you've made a mistake. You've gotten too close to something you don't understand. Tom's world seemed to tilt. Marcus had been with them the whole time. They had trusted him. They had counted on him. But now, with his betrayal hanging in the air like a thick fog, everything began to crumble. It wasn't just Jack, and it wasn't just the men in suits. The conspiracy they had stumbled upon had deeper roots than they could have ever imagined. It had spread through their lives like a virus, infecting their closest relationships, their most trusted allies. Everyone was part of it. Even Marcus. Tom, Jack's voice was strained, his words hurried as if time was running out. You don't know what you're up against. These men, Marcus, they're not just after you. They've been controlling everything. Everything. Your family, your memories, your past, they've had their hands in it all along. You've been chasing ghosts, thinking they were just memories. But it's much worse than that. They've been manipulating you, using you, and now you're too deep to get out. The words hit like a tidal wave, crashing over Tom's thoughts, drowning him in disbelief and rage. He turned to Sarah, searching her face for some kind of answer, some sign that this was all just a nightmare. But she looked just as lost as he felt, her eyes wide, mouth agape. She, too, had trusted Marcus. They both had. And now, standing in front of them, was the stark reality that they had been played from the very beginning. Marcus took another step forward, his hands now raised, palms out, as if trying to calm the storm brewing in Tom's mind. I never wanted it to come to this, he said, his voice laced with something darker, almost apologetic. But you've made it impossible to keep you in the dark. You've learned too much. And now, I have no choice but to stop you. All of you. Tom's breath caught in his throat, his fists clenching at his sides. Betrayal. It wasn't just a word anymore, it was the air he was breathing. Marcus, his friend, his confidant, had been working against him all along. There was no turning back now. The web had spun too tight. Before Tom could react, the men in suits surged forward, their cold, merciless eyes fixed on him and Sarah. One of them grabbed Jack roughly by the arm, yanking him toward the door with no care for the older man's protest. Tom lunged forward, instinct driving him, but Marcus was already in front of him, blocking the way. Don't try to fight it, Marcus said quietly, almost pityingly. It's already over. You can't stop this now. It was in that moment that Tom realized the true scale of the conspiracy. This wasn't just about them anymore, it was about everything. Their family. Their lives. Their very existence. They had been pawns all along, their every move anticipated and controlled by forces much bigger, much darker than they could comprehend. And now, standing on the precipice of a truth that could destroy them all, Tom had to make a choice: fight back, or disappear into the shadows, just like everyone else who had been swallowed by the conspiracy before them. The men were moving quickly now, their intent clear. They weren't here to negotiate. They weren't here to talk. They were here to make sure the game ended. The clock was ticking, and time was running out. What would Tom choose? And was there anyone left he could trust? In that moment, as everything seemed to collapse around him, Tom realized just how far they'd fallen and how far they still had to go to uncover the truth. The room was a blur of motion as Tom fought back the rush of panic, his chest heaving with every breath. Marcus stood in front of him, his face cold, almost emotionless, blocking any escape. The men in suits were closing in, their presence suffocating, like a storm ready to break. Tom's heart was racing, each beat a drum signaling that time was running out, that the answers they'd been chasing were just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of everything they thought they knew. Behind him, Sarah stood frozen, her eyes wide, fear and disbelief etched on her face as if she couldn't comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. Her voice trembled, but she managed to speak, her words hoarse and desperate. "Tom, what's going on? What are they going to do to us?" Tom didn't know how to answer her. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to get them out of this room, out of this house, away from the danger closing in. But deep down, he knew that wasn't possible anymore. They had come too far, uncovered too much. There was no running from the truth now. It was time to face it, to confront the nightmare head-on. Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice laced with a strange kind of finality. "It's not about you or Sarah or Jack. It never was. You're just pawns in a game much bigger than you can even imagine. And now, you're too deep. You can't undo what you've started." Tom felt his world crumble, his heart heavy with betrayal. Marcus was right in front of him, so close now, yet he felt a million miles away. This wasn't his friend anymore. This was someone who had sold him out, someone who had watched him stumble through lie after lie, each false lead and broken promise leading them further down a dark path. Everything was wrong. All their trust, all their efforts, had been used against them. But even in that moment of crushing realization, something inside Tom snapped. The years of searching for answers, the sleepless nights, the doubts, they had all led to this. He wasn't going to back down now, not when the truth was so close, not when everything he had worked for was about to be ripped away. "You think you have all the power," Tom said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "But you don't. This ends now. I'm going to find out what you're hiding, and I'll make sure everyone knows what you did." For a split second, Marcus's face flickered, a shadow of uncertainty crossing his eyes. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. His gaze hardened, and he took a step closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "You don't know what you're up against, Tom. These people, the ones you've been chasing, they're untouchable. They control everything. Everything. And you're not getting out of this alive." The words hit Tom like a punch to the gut. His mind raced, trying to process what Marcus had just revealed. They weren't just up against a few bad guys or corrupt officials. This was something far worse. Something that had been lurking in the shadows for years, pulling the strings of everyone in their lives, families, friends, even their memories. This wasn't a conspiracy anymore. It was a system. A network that spanned beyond anything Tom could have imagined. As the weight of that truth settled on his shoulders, Sarah's voice cut through the thickening tension. "Tom, look." Her words sent a chill down his spine. She was pointing at something on the floor near the back of the room, just beyond where Jack had been thrown to the ground earlier. A small, discarded piece of paper. It was tattered, weathered, as though it had been hidden away for years. Tom couldn't breathe as he moved toward it, his hand shaking as he reached down to pick it up. The paper was stained, crinkled at the edges, but the words were still legible. It was a name. A name Tom hadn't expected to see. Ethan. But it wasn't just any name, it was a file number. A reference code. And at the bottom of the paper, scrawled hastily, were a few words that made Tom's stomach turn. Subject 87 to 1. Start sequence. Must erase memories. The realization hit him like a freight train, so powerful it knocked the breath out of him. His knees buckled slightly, but he caught himself, gripping the paper tightly as his hands started to tremble. This wasn't just about uncovering family secrets. It wasn't about the mysterious memories Ethan had been hiding. This was about control. The people behind this conspiracy weren't just manipulating memories, they were erasing them. They had used Ethan as a tool, as a weapon, to keep this twisted game going. And they had been using Tom and Sarah to dig deeper into a past that wasn't even real. No, Tom whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. This isn't possible. They can't have done this to us. They can't. But before he could finish, a cold, familiar voice echoed from the doorway. You really think you've figured it out? Jack's voice was laced with a twisted satisfaction as he stepped into the room, his movements slow and deliberate. His eyes met Tom's, and for the first time, Tom saw the truth behind the facade, the truth about Jack's role in everything that had happened. Jack wasn't just another victim of the conspiracy. He was the conspiracy. You were never supposed to get this far, Tom, Jack said, his voice heavy with regret, but underneath it was something darker, something far more dangerous. You were never meant to learn the truth. You were just a pawn, like the rest of us. But now, well, now you've dug too deep. And you've brought her into it too, he added, his eyes flicking to Sarah, a twisted smile forming at the corners of his lips. Tom's mind raced. His heart pounded. It was all coming together now. Jack had been using them, feeding them false leads, playing them like chess pieces in a game that spanned far beyond what any of them had understood. The people behind the conspiracy had manipulated Jack just as much as they had manipulated Ethan, and all along, Jack had been their enforcer, their eyes and ears within the family. Tom's blood boiled with fury. His fists clenched. He couldn't back down. Not now. Not after everything they had uncovered. The stakes were too high. They had to finish this, no matter the cost. But before he could make a move, Jack's smile faltered, his eyes darting nervously to the door as a sudden noise echoed from the hallway. Tom's breath caught in his throat as the door slammed open, and a new figure stepped into the room, a figure they had never expected to see. It was Ethan. Only he wasn't the same person. His eyes were blank, hollow, as if the soul had been drained from him. He moved slowly, mechanically, like a puppet on strings. And in his hand, he held something that made Tom's heart stop, an envelope, sealed with a symbol that none of them had seen before. I'm sorry, Ethan's voice was barely a whisper, empty and distant. I can't remember. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place with a horrific clarity. The memories weren't just erased, they were rewritten. And Ethan had been the key. The one who had been manipulated, used as a weapon to cover up everything. And now, in the final moments, the true nature of the conspiracy had been revealed. They weren't just controlling memories. They were controlling people. As the truth hung in the air, Tom realized there was no escaping it now. There was no going back. And as the final twist of fate unraveled, all he could do was brace for what came next, knowing that the battle for the truth had only just begun. The silence that fell over the room was suffocating. Tom's eyes were locked on Ethan, who stood before him, a shell of the person he had once known. There was no recognition in Ethan's gaze, no trace of the person who had been with him through everything, the laughter, the tears, the shared memories. Only emptiness. The envelope in Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he stared at Tom, as though waiting for something, anything, to break the tension in the room. Tom could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him, suffocating him with its unbearable heaviness. Everything they had fought for, everything they had uncovered, had led them here, to this moment, to Ethan, to the final realization that nothing was as it seemed. The memories, the conspiracies, the betrayals, it was all a manipulation, a twisted game that had been played with their lives. And now, standing in front of him, was the one person who had been used as a pawn in this entire nightmare. Ethan, Tom's voice cracked, struggling to find the words that could reach the man he had once called his friend. He took a step forward, then stopped, realizing that the person in front of him wasn't Ethan anymore. He had been taken. His identity had been erased, his memories rewritten, and now he was nothing more than a puppet, trapped in a body that no longer remembered itself. The envelope in Ethan's hand dropped to the floor, its contents spilling out like a forgotten secret. Tom knelt to pick it up, his hands shaking as he unfolded the document inside. It was a file, a report detailing the last year of Ethan's life, each moment meticulously altered, each memory manipulated and controlled by the very people who had orchestrated this entire conspiracy. Tom's mind raced as he read the pages, each word confirming the truth they had feared but never fully understood. Ethan wasn't the only one whose memories had been altered. They had all been victims, their lives twisted and rewritten by forces far beyond their control. But there was something else in the report. Something that made Tom's blood run cold. In the last line of the document, a new name was listed. A name that sent shockwaves through his body: Jack Bennett. The very person who had been guiding them, feeding them false information, who had pretended to be their ally all along. Jack had been in on it from the beginning, he was part of the conspiracy. And now, the final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Jack hadn't just been a victim of the conspiracy, he had been the one pulling the strings. Tom's heart pounded in his chest as the truth sunk in. The person who had promised to help them had been the one orchestrating their destruction. Jack had manipulated them, used them to uncover the very secrets that had destroyed their lives. And now, as Ethan stood motionless in front of him, Tom realized that there was no escaping this. There was no way out. The conspiracy wasn't over. It had only just begun. A wave of anger and betrayal washed over him, but there was no time to dwell on it. He had to act. Tom's gaze flicked to Sarah, who stood behind him, still in shock, trying to comprehend the enormity of what had just been revealed. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw the same burning determination in them that he had felt when this all started. They were in this together, for better or worse. They had always been in this together. Without a word, Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out the small device they had taken from Jack's office days earlier, something they had thought was insignificant at the time, but now, in the light of everything they had uncovered, it was the key. The device had been linked to the network that controlled the entire operation, the people who had been manipulating their lives for years. It wasn't just a tool, it was a signal, a beacon that could lead them straight to the heart of the conspiracy. Tom turned to face Jack, who had been standing silently by the door, watching them with a look of cold amusement. "You thought you could control this, didn't you?" Tom said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of everything that had been lost. "You thought you could control us. But you didn't count on us fighting back." Jack's expression faltered for just a moment, a flicker of something, fear, maybe, or regret, flashing in his eyes before he quickly masked it with his usual cold demeanor. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Jack said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is bigger than you. You'll never win. You'll never escape." But Tom was no longer listening. He knew what he had to do. They all did. With the device in hand, Tom moved toward the door, his resolve hardening with every step. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about defeating Jack or the people who had played with their lives. It was about something far bigger than that: freedom. The freedom to remember. The freedom to choose. To break free from the chains that had bound them for so long. As Tom reached the door, he looked back at Ethan one last time. His heart ached for the person Ethan had been, for the person he could have been if he had never been caught in this web of lies. But there was no time for mourning. There was no time for regrets. As they moved through the door and into the dark, uncertain future, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The people behind the conspiracy were still out there, still watching, still waiting. The game wasn't finished. It was just beginning. And as the sound of footsteps echoed behind them, Tom couldn't help but wonder what would happen when the truth finally came to light. Would it set them free, or would it be the thing that destroyed them once and for all? The answers were still out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. But for now, all they could do was keep moving forward. Keep fighting for what they believed in, for the truth that had been buried for so long. And maybe, just maybe, they would find the peace they had been searching for all along. But the one thing Tom knew for sure was that their journey was far from over. The mystery remained, lingering in the air like a forgotten dream. And only time would tell if they would ever truly uncover it.